Hello, everyone. I guess we'll get started. Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines, where we take a look behind the stories that you're reading in our paper. And today we're looking at one of the latest installments in Uncovered, which has been over a year-long project looking at questionable government conduct throughout South Carolina, partnering with community newspapers and taking on some investigations on our own as well. Joining me today, I'm Glenn Smith. I'm the public service and watchdog editor here at the paper. And joining me today are my colleagues, Tony Bartelme, who's a senior projects reporter, and Shamira McCray, who's an environmental reporter who has written extensively about some of these issues. I want to remind everyone that the event is being recorded and it's going to be sent out afterwards with contact info in case anyone has any additional questions or wants to contact us directly. I would also encourage everyone to submit questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we will get to those shortly. Okay, so today we're here to talk about monkeys and blood and conflicts of interest featured in our latest installment of Uncovered. This past weekend, Tony and Shamira took a deep look at how South Carolina's Department of Natural Resources rakes in millions from a pharmaceutical company that leases an island in the Ace Basin where thousands of monkeys are kept for research. That money goes directly to pay the salaries of people in DNR's Marine Division, which regulates the company's harvesting of horseshoe crabs for medical purposes, a practice that has drawn criticism from environmental groups. So Tony, let's get started with you. How did you get onto this story and what intrigued you about this odd arrangement the state has with Charles River Labs?
Well, thanks, Glenn. It's great to be here with you all. Thanks for tuning in. So like a lot of our stories, they begin with tips. And I got a tip, it was last summer, about something that I found was very curious. The tipster said that one of DNR's programs was being funded entirely by a private company. And I thought that was a little unusual. So as part of our Uncovered project, its mission basically is to investigate things that investigate institutions that are tend to avoid scrutiny or not be looked at in a truly deep way. So as soon as I got that tip, I fired off a bunch of Freedom of Information Act requests to the Department of Natural Resources, which owns this island in the middle of Ace Basin that has long had a bunch of monkeys on it. And I'd always been curious. I've been here a long time, and I always knew that about this monkey colony, and I'd always been interested in digging a little deeper into it. So that's how it all began.
Yeah, Monkey Island has been a source of curiosity for many years, and I know we've tried to visit it on several occasions. I think as close as we've gotten is in a boat and kayaking around it a couple times. How did DNR come to own that island, Tony? And can you explain the relationship between them and Charles Rivers Labs a little bit more? How did this relationship all started?
Yeah, so we'll just sort of set the scene a little bit. Morgan Island it's not Monkey Island, it's really Morgan Island, and Morgan Island is at the kind of in the Ace Basin, which is this confluence of rivers near Beaufort, and it's this sort of conservation success story in South Carolina where public and private partners have preserved this area. So there was a monkey colony in Puerto Rico in the 1970s that was supplying monkeys for medical experiments. And it became, I guess the federal government wanted to create some monkey colonies, monkey breeding colonies in the United States. And Morgan Island was one of those in the late 70s. And so they shipped a bunch of monkeys from Puerto Rico into the Beaufort Marine Corps Air Station, and then took them to Morgan Island. And that all happened about late 1979, early 1980. And then in about 2002, there was an attempt, I guess, by the owner of the island to develop it. And that was a big concern in the conservation community because it was such an important part of the Ace Basin. So long story short, DNR bought it with federal money, about $20 million in federal money. And suddenly DNR was a landlord to a very large monkey farm.
Okay. Just point out to our guests here, I guess Shamira is having a little bit of difficulty joining us here, some technical difficulties. So we're going to continue on with Tony. I was going to ask this of Shamira, but I'm sure you can answer this yourself. You've been out there a couple times, not on the island itself, but once with Nancy Mace, a month or two ago, and once recently with Shamira and a photographer. Can you set the scene a little bit? I know you've got a picture of one of the docks there at the island in back of you. Tell me a little bit about like what this place looks like, and as you pull up, what do you see, and let people know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so the first time I went, we were kind of well into the research of the story last December. Nancy Mace sort of says she discovered, that there's this big monkey colony on Morgan Island, and so it's actually, the monkeys are owned by the National Institutes of Health, and it's a federal preserve, I guess, or a federal operation where the NIH pays a company called Charles River Laboratories about $3.4 million a year to manage this colony, and so that it's really hard to get to. And Nancy Mace had this big press conference, she chartered a boat, and we all took a boat to go look at the monkeys. We didn't see any that day. And really an important part of a story is kind of getting a setting and getting a scene, and really allowing readers to experience what you're experiencing. So we chartered a boat about a month or so ago, and it was from Edisto Island, and we had to weave through all these creeks and marshes until we came upon this island with a bunch of signs, no trespassing signs. The public's not allowed to go on. And there, after a few minutes, we heard some screeches. We saw some rustling in the trees, and then there they were, the monkeys. It was very, very, very strange sight to see.
You say they had like tattoos on their faces and things like that?
Yeah, I couldn't see them, but our photographer could through his zoom lens. I guess that's how you identify them.
It's got to be kind of wacky seeing a bunch of monkeys out in the middle of VA's Basin, though, right?
Oh yeah, it was just, so they're just sort of lounging around. We saw them jumping from tree to tree, and there was a little baby hanging from one of them, and yeah, it was as if you were transported suddenly to a place far away from South Carolina.
Okay. Well, we want to welcome Shamira. She finally overcame the technical obstacles in her way. Turn right now to you and put you on the spot immediately. The other part of the equation in this story involves horseshoe crabs. Maybe you could tell people just a little bit like what are horseshoe crabs, and what does Charles River do with the horseshoe crabs, and why has this all become so controversial?
Yeah, so horseshoe crabs are actually not crabs at all. Genetically, they're closer to scorpions and spiders than actual crabs. They have these spikes and these helmet-shaped shells that make them look a little scary, but according to biologists, they're pretty much harmless to humans. But it's the blue blood from these horseshoe crabs that's valuable. Scientists have figured out how to create an extract from this blood to detect deadly bacteria. And labs like Charles River use it to make sure that vaccines and other drugs are safe. So the process is that fishermen go out, collect these crabs, take them to Charles River labs where they're bled, and return to the water, sometimes the same day. But from research, not all crabs make it through this process, and some are sick afterwards. And that's what's sort of concerning to environmentalists, scientists. There's a bird, the red knot bird, that's federally protected, that depends on horseshoe crab eggs to live. And so with fewer horseshoe crabs and fewer healthy horseshoe crabs, it sort of hinders the food available for these birds.
Okay. So the story revealed some interesting details, I guess, about the relationship between Charles Rivers and DNR, and the effects this might be having on DNR's regulation of the horseshoe crab harvesting and bleeding. I'm thinking about some of those internal emails that showed DNR officials pushing back on concerns that the practice might be harming the vitality of the horseshoe crab population. Tony, how did you go about obtaining these records? Did you face any pushback? And like, what did you find in there? What was that sort of, I guess, aha moment as you're going through these emails and other documents that really kind of said, I think I got a story here?
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn. So in a lot of ways, this story was about monkeys and crabs, horseshoe crabs, but it's really about money. And so when you're doing an investigative report, you follow the money. It's a journalism cliche. And so what I did was I began submitting these open records requests under the State Freedom of Information Act to the Department of Natural Resources that owns Morgan Island and also manages and monitors horseshoe crabs. And we actually had to pay $400 or $500 to get these records, and it took months. And so some of these records were really interesting. One of the first things I had asked for was I wanted to answer that question. Was Charles River money funding a DNR program? And so lo and behold, we ended up getting some spreadsheets and other documents that show, yes, money that's that Charles River pays to DNR through its Morgan Island lease arrangement directly funds very popular programs such as turtle programs. It funds a bunch of staff salaries for the Ace Basin. Funded something like 33 employees' salaries or partial salaries, including people who have says in how in Charles River's horseshoe crab area. So it was this weird confluence of money that we needed to kind of investigate further. So that was sort of the beginning. Once we had those documents, then we wanted to get the context and understand it, in a deeper way.
Excuse me. Both of you requested to tour the company, Charles River Labs, the company's horseshoe crab bleeding operation lab over in West Ashley. One of you, Shamira, was told, yes, you may come. The other was told no. What was going on there? Shamira, can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so about a week before we were set, or I was set to go to Charles River Labs, a spokeswoman called and I asked her, hey, can Tony come along with me? And she said, well, no, we don't really want to make this a party. And then she went on to say that she knew that Tony had filed a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests about the company and their relationship with Charles River Labs. And so that was the reason why they didn't want him there. The reason they knew that is because they'd filed their own Freedom of Information Act request to see who was seeking information about the company. Nevertheless, I was able to go, and a photographer came with me. And when we got there, we got to tour the entire facility, or at least that's what it seemed like. Didn't get to see really any horseshoe crabs or any blue blood. The only blue blood and horseshoe crabs I was able to see was the ones shown on a video that I saw at the beginning of the tour. So we were able to see a lot of the equipment the company builds and sells to pharmaceutical companies. They have a whole research, engineering, and design department there. We were able to see that and actually see a group of lab technicians test medications for safety. So that was pretty cool. But no horseshoe crabs, no blue blood. The executives there, though, were pretty open to answering all of my questions, except questions related to Monkey Island.
That's interesting. So we should note that it's like not horseshoe crab season yet, right? So I mean that's why we didn't see those. It wasn't that we couldn't see the operation, but it just wasn't that time of the year.
That's right.
So they did give you answers to your questions. Was there anything you kind of left wanting to know more about, or things they wouldn't touch? You said you talked about Monkey Island. They wouldn't discuss that. How come?
Well, so they reiterated that they don't own the island. They lease the island from DNR. It's the NIH operation, and they just provide veterinarian services for them.
Okay, that's interesting. So Tony, I think one of the more interesting things I saw in the story was the reaction from Robert Boyles Jr., the director at DNR, to the questions you were asking and what you were finding. You quoted him saying, "I'll just be blunt. It never crossed my mind that there's a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict. or appearance of a conflict. What'd you think about that response? What was it like to ask those questions of someone in leadership? And what do you think is going to come of all this?
Yeah, so to just quick refresh, yeah. So once we had put together our story and our findings over time, we asked the Department of Natural Resources for some comments. What are their thoughts about our findings? And they were very open to talking. I went over to the DNR's headquarters in Fort Johnson. And I remember it was in a big conference room overlooking the harbor, a spectacular view. And Robert Boyles, the head of DNR, was there sitting, as well as a couple of other employees. And, I kind of went through it, and to his credit, he basically said, yeah, it never dawned on me that this would be a conflict of interest, or that it was an appearance of conflict of interest. So sometimes your interviews are full of conflict and tension and all that, but they were, I think, awfully open. So I think it's kind of interesting that he said that there was a conflict of interest after all these years. And I have worked with a lot of DNR folks over the years, and I think a lot of them have very good intentions, or dedicated public folks. So what will happen will be interesting. So I think he recognized that there's a problem, a conflict of interest that taints a lot of their activities when it comes to monitoring horseshoe crabs. And there's probably some paths to somehow insulate the money, but doing so probably would mean instead of getting money directly from Charles River and then sending it to people's salaries, perhaps sending it to the general fund, and that means state lawmakers would have to somehow make up a very large difference in DNR's budget.
So they started looking for some of these, I guess, new streams of revenue after getting whacked pretty hard in the budget process for several years, correct? I mean, they'd have to make up that ground somewhere.
Yeah, in the early 2000s, the state lawmakers were just axing one program after another. Mark Sanford kind of came in, and then it was part of that sort of Tea Party, effort back then to really shrink state government. DHEC got whacked, DNR got whacked, and so suddenly, they are losing millions of dollars in their budget, but then they have this increasingly lucrative rent that's coming from this breeding colony. So they were in a difficult situation.
Okay. I'm going to get to a couple questions now from readers and viewers. Guess we'll figure out who might be best to answer those. One of the advanced questions talked about, I guess, the effect that this bleeding operation has on the horseshoe crab population. So many crabs do not recover and die. Populations are suffering, I guess some folks say. The questioner says there are now much better RNA tests that can do the same thing as the horseshoe crab blood can do. Why are they not moving to the new tests and saving crab populations? Shamira, you want to field that one, or?
Yeah, so I did ask that when I visited the lab, and basically the executives told me that there's still not enough research to be sure that these other tests are effective in sort of detecting each type of bacteria or contamination that could show up in drugs. That's what they say.
Okay. Now others would disagree. I know I've seen you've written some articles about that. What's the other side say, I guess?
Other scientists are saying there's no use in using horseshoe crabs. These other tests are very effective, and we can pretty much just leave horseshoe crabs alone for detecting contamination.
Okay, we have another question. It seems the real problem here is the involvement of DNR. It is hard to get people to volunteer for clinical trials, and primates in limited studies are valuable in vaccine, other drug therapy development, and testing. Not really a question, I guess, a comment. Any thoughts on that? Or
That's a tricky question. I don't know. DNR is not involved at all in any medical testing, you know, and they don't have any real involvement, any significant involvement in the monkey breeding program itself. It's helpful to understand that Charles River Labs is this giant pharmaceutical company that you know, has a really fascinating history. It really began in the, you know, in the decades ago as an animal breeding company in Boston along the Charles River, where it gets its name. And so it's been supplying animals to researchers to help develop life-saving medicines. And over time, it's grown to, you know, into a very large both animal breeding and drug development company with a big operation here. So they, you know, they've been around for a long time, and they, you know, they end up, you know, they are, so they are receiving a lot of money from the federal government to manage this colony, and then so DNR really isn't involved in that, you know, the actual management of that colony. It's really between Charles River Labs and the federal government.
Yes. Okay. Another viewer had a question sort of off of that. DNR owns the island. The NIH owns the monkeys. Charles River only provides veterinary services. Who is doing the research on the monkeys? Do we know?
Yeah, so the monkeys, so the NIH owns the monkeys. There's about 3,500 rhesus monkeys there. And the federal government pays Charles River Labs about $3.4 million. It's a cost plus a contract, as far as I understand, which means they are compensated for their expenses, and then they get a profit on top of that. And then they supply about 400 or 500 monkeys a year to researchers around, I guess, around the country. And those are, you know, different researchers, you know, at universities and federal sides of things as well. So it's a mix. No research is done on that island itself. It's simply a breeding colony.
Okay. Another person would like to know, how come outsiders are not allowed there?
So the monkeys are, so the monkeys, you don't want to give monkeys diseases, and you don't want monkeys to give you diseases. So they're, you know, it's off limits because of that. There are concerns that maybe monkeys might bite people. Monkeys carry some viruses that you don't want. And so it's really designed to protect the monkeys and people as well. So completely off limits to the public.
Completely. No one's been allowed to visit out there at all? Did you know?
I think if you're allowed to visit, I've seen the conditions of to get onto that island are, you know, they're very stringent restrictions.
Like vaccinations and things like that, or
vaccinations, and then yeah.
Okay. Another person asks, did you interview AlphaGenesis, Yemisi-based research company at all for this? Do they have a tie to this? I'm not aware.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions. You know, hey, you ought to look at the monkey farm in Yemisi. So this story was about the conflict of interest first and foremost. It was a, you know, it's about monkeys and crabs, but it's really ultimately about the intersection between government and industry. So AlphaGenesis owns another breeding facility in Yemisi. It's completely separate, different company, different story, really.
Okay. Shamira, this might be one for you. Person says, I have heard varying mortality rates for bled crabs, 15% to 40%. Any idea what the accurate rate is?
Yeah, I don't have an accurate rate either. I've heard a lot of different numbers, so I think that's something that needs to be researched more.
Yeah, well, let me follow up with you there too. So there was a lot of discussion, lawsuits, and back and forth. Cape Romaine and some of the harvesting in the area. Where does all that stuff stand right now? Oh, you're muted.
Hey, Tony, could you give an update on that lawsuit?
So which lawsuit are you talking about?
I believe something came out this week, right?
Yeah, so the conservation community is suing DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, and Charles River for failing to properly enforce the Endangered Species Act. And so they filed that recently, and Charles River Labs and DNR it's on my understanding that they have responded to that lawsuit, but it's all it's all in the court system, and it's going to take a while to play out.
Okay. This is probably another one for you here. Person asked, what was Nancy Mace's motive for going out there? Was it to investigate the same thing as you were investigating, or some other reason?
Yeah. Why did Nancy Mace go out there? So this was in December, and I was well underway in working on this story, and we got a note that, hey, Nancy Mace is going to go out to Morgan Island, and she's going to have a press conference. And so it was kind of a chance to kind of go out there and get another good sense of the island. So she went out there. Her primary purpose was to highlight her concerns about animal testing, and also it was actually a lot deeper than that. She was targeting Anthony Fauci, who is again the face of the pandemic. He's also with NIAID, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, and has become a frequent target of Republican officials. So she has this big floating press conference where she begins to talk about how, I just learned about this monkey facility, and I thought it was just a retirement community for monkeys, and that had nothing to do with animal testing. And I'm shocked to find out that they are these monkeys are used for tests. And kind of called her on that. It was, this thing has been around for decades. It doesn't take too much to figure out that, that yes, this is a federal monkey breeding facility. So it was this mixture of, I think she has probably genuine concerns about animal testing in general. She's been very, very forthright about that. But it was also really just a kind of a political, it wasn't a dog and pony show, more of a monkey and pony show, I guess.
Yeah, and sort of, little known fact about reporters too is that they will take almost any excuse to take a boat trip anywhere around here. There's so many beautiful places to see, and regardless of the story, it's hard to pass up a boat ride if one is offered.
Yeah, and that was a very important thing for us to do from a storytelling standpoint was get readers to the island, give them a sense of what it's like to kind of go through the marshes and then suddenly come upon these weird, creatures that you don't typically see here. And so, yeah, so I got 2 boat trips out of it. I'm pretty happy about that.
A few questions here, deep into the science of the synthetic alternative to the crab blood. Let's see. One person says, understand that test, the ALAL test, the synthetic alternative to that is both accurate, comprehensive. The real issue is the expense to convert. Any info on that? Another person said, I think that's, hold on a second, scroll up. Another person says that they don't think that that's approved, is not FDA approved in the US. Are other organizations using the synthetic version of LAL? Anyone know? And so it's a little deeper. Again, this is sort of more of a story about the intersection of money, politics and money. Either of you have any sort of deep insight into this synthetic alternative? Or
Shamira, you want to take that? Because
yeah, so I'm not sure of the cost or anything of that, but I do know that Charles River said that they're testing a synthetic version of the LAL at their lab now, but they just aren't confident that it's ready. So it's not like they aren't okay with switching over to it. They're still testing it from what they tell me.
okay.
And one of the challenges of telling a story like this is its complexity. And so you don't want to, so we have to kind of focus on what we think is relevant and newsworthy. And this LAL is the name of the extract that helps identify toxins in medical equipment and vaccines and other medicines. And it's very valuable stuff. It goes for 60,000, like 60,000 bucks, for a gallon. It's, a very important substance. And then there's a tremendous debate about whether a synthetic alternative could replace that and then replace the need to capture, these horseshoe crabs. But that was a whole debate. If we had gotten into that, it would have taken us away from that very important point that we wanted to make about influence and government regulation.
Conflicts of interest, right. Okay, I've got time for one more here. Either of you can field this. The DNR is very good at checking fish populations and regulating catch limits. Why are they not interested in the horseshoe crab population?
I think they are interested. I would, from what I understand, that they're interested in the horseshoe crab population. They've done a lot of studies on it. They need to do more to really get a handle on it. They acknowledge, as well as Charles River. But yeah, the fundamental assumption of that question is, should they be doing more? And I think both Charles River and DNR would say yes.
And there's the question, clearly the story raised is money paying or playing some role in those decisions.
Yeah, it was very odd. I had stumbled across this email and document back. It was last fall when I first saw it. And lo and behold, Charles River makes this, a lobbyist for Charles River makes this very unusual offer to DNR. Hey, we'll give you $500,000 for a special biomedical research license. And that, typically doesn't happen. So, there's a lot of money, a lot of money at stake. And so we were privileged to just explore some of that and give people a little bit of a picture of what's happening.
Okay. That I guess wraps us up for today. Thank you, Tony and Shamira, for joining us. Thank everyone at home for watching. Remember, you can sign up for any of our free newsletters at postandcourier.com newsletter-sign up. If you're a subscriber, we'd like to say thank you very much for doing so. If you're not, you can sign up at postandcourier.com/subscribe. Till next time, I'm Glenn Smith, and have a great day.